Hi, everyone, and welcome to A Heart for Writing. And today I have a very, very special guest. His name is Sergeant Patrick O'Donnell. Patrick is, he worked in one of the nation's largest police departments for 25 years. He's been in charge of thousands of crime scenes and investigations, including homicides, sexual assaults, and robberies. He's now an author, podcaster, and public speaker. He's also the host of a very popular podcast, Cops and Writers. And let's bring Patrick on and talk to him. Hey, Patrick.
Hi, Joan. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Thank you for having me on the show.
Oh, no problem. I'm really glad you were able to make it. I know you've got a busy schedule coming up.
I do.
So you say you live with your wife, kids, 3 dogs. Your hobbies include physical fitness, travel, riding motorcycles, and shenanigans. Now, that one I'm interested in.
Well, the shenanigans sometimes come with all the above, you know. It's just so I have been retired now for 2 years from police work.
Okay.
So yes, shenanigans were afoot when I was a cop, but maybe I have to watch it now because I thought I'd have more free time, but like the last 6 months I've been busier than I ever have been. We can go into later about all the stuff I've been doing, but I've just been super busy. So shenanigan time has been severely decreased. So I'm a little bit sad about that, but hey, that's all right.
I guess you got to give up some for something else, but
Absolutely.
So the one question I do ask all of my writers is, when did you discover you had a heart for writing?
Boy, that's a good question. Yeah, I went to college. It's funny because I started college as a music major. I was going to be a high school band teacher. That's what I wanted to do.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And I got bit by the criminal justice bug about halfway through. And to be fair, I was working full time and I was going to school full time most of the time. And I was trying to squeeze everything in. And the music classes were very labor intensive. It's like, okay, class piano 1, class piano 2, and some of these were like 5 days a week and they're only like 1 or 2 credits. And, I just got done unloading trucks and I'm wearing my like work clothes and I'm surrounded by like, all these music students wearing all their goth stuff. It looked like I was going to a funeral. They're all wearing black and they look very sad. I'm like, come on, cheer up. But I just didn't feel like I fit in that crowd very well. And I was just like, I like police stuff ever since I was a kid. I grew up in Chicago as a little kid. And I remember seeing my first search warrant being executed at our neighbor's house.
Oh, wow.
And I could see my face was against the glass of the window in our kitchen, and these houses are very close together. And I'm looking, and there was 2 cops in our backyard. One had an M16, the other one had a shotgun, and they're all suited up. They're all Kevlar'd up in their helmets and shields, and they have a battering ram, and the door goes down, and it's just pandemonium. And I'm just like, this is the coolest stuff ever, man. So I've always had that in the back of my mind. And later, as a police officer, you do a ton of writing. Most of the time it's kind of dry, but you try and slip in something every now and then to make it a little bit fun. I remember one time I was doing a use of force, which is when a police officer uses force, say they have to arrest somebody and they don't want to go to jail, if they use their pepper spray or a taser or they're like physically fighting with somebody, a sergeant has to come and do a report. They do an investigation to make sure that all the SOPs are being followed. It wasn't too much. It wasn't enough. It wasn't, there's a paper trail for everything. It's very redundant. So I've written a lot of, reports. But I remember one time I put in, it's like, well, a Donnybrook broke out. And my captain pulled me into her office. She said, what are you doing, O'Donnell? What's a Donnybrook? I said, it's a fight. Come on, look it up. It's fun. She said, we're not here for fun. I'm like, oh, come on. This is good.
Man.
So she wasn't no sense of humor with that one. But I was getting close to retiring. I had a couple of years to go. And I didn't want to be like a lot of cops that I've seen through the years that 25, 30 years go by, and then boom, I'm still fairly young. I was 55 years old, and I didn't want to go be a mall cop. I didn't want anything else to do with police work per se. It's a young man's game, and I'm not young. And I just, not that I hated it, I just had enough. I was in charge of a lot of stuff, and I had a ton of responsibility. And I told myself, the only person I'm going to be responsible for anymore is me. That's it. You literally have life and death situations where you have to make split-second decisions that are going to impact, not just you, but everybody else. And that's a lot of pressure. And I was just it was a feeling of relief when I walked away from it. I loved my job. I loved my career. I had a great time, but it was time, so I was thinking to myself, what can I do? So before I was a cop, I sold cars for 4 years.
Okay.
And
were you good at it?
I think so. I didn't get fired, so that was good. And then on top of that, I never, didn't make my rent payment, or I never starved to death or anything like that. So I guess I was okay. And in the winter, I bartended just to make the bills, because not a lot of people are buying cars in January in Wisconsin. Yeah, it's very, very cold here. So just to get through the winter months. And, fast forward, I'm helping all these friends and family. They're like, you should really write a book about how to buy cars. Because I would go to the dealership, and I started like a little business, an internet business. And it didn't turn out like I thought it would, because I had people calling me day and night. It's like time zones. I was very busy with work, family, outside hobbies, all that kind of stuff. And I 86 the car buying business, but I did write the book, and it was a glorified PDF. It was nothing great, but
not a New York Times bestseller.
No, right? The Pulitzer people were not breaking my doors down. But I learned how to self-publish.
Yes,
and I cut my teeth on that. I did my own cover, which was abominable. The title was "I Never Wore Plaid: Insider Secrets from a Former Car Salesperson."
Oh my gosh, you still have copies of that somewhere?
It's still up on Amazon. It's on Kindle and paperback.
That's funny.
It wasn't edited the best. Not my proudest moment. Yeah, and I wrote it under a pen name, because when you're a police officer, you don't have a private life. Any kind of side hustle or employment or anything like that has to be approved by the chief of police. It goes up a chain, and I'm like, he's not even going to understand what this is. So I just wrote it under a pen name, and I did okay with it. But like I said, it was more of a learning adventure. But more importantly, I got to know a bunch of self-published authors. I started listening to podcasts. I started, I discovered the 20 books to 50K group. Before that, it was K-boards. I was on that, and that wasn't very friendly. So I went over to 20 books to 50K, Michael Anderley, Craig Martell, and I'm like, wow, these guys are really cool. They're very, very helpful, and they just want to help people out. And I'm like, wow, okay, what works, what doesn't work, etc. And I started learning the business, and then one of my fellow sergeants was writing his doctoral dissertation. He was getting his PhD, and he was so sick of writing. He says, Pat, I can't stand all this writing, So he started writing post-apocalyptic fiction, because we were talking about writing. And I said, you can just throw it up on Amazon yourself, dude. And he says, I can. And I'm like, yeah, let me show you. So I showed him, he did it, and he made a bunch of money this first year. It was kind of like the Kindle Gold Rush years, where it didn't have that great of a cover. It wasn't edited the best, but he still made a hefty amount of cabbage. And I'm just like, wow, good for you. That's awesome. And I'm like, well, I could do that. So I wrote a post-apocalyptic book.
So is that your Mad City? Okay, hold on. I got a picture of that right here.
Yeah.
And this was in 2016.
Yes. That was 2016. And before that, I actually wrote a book about divorce, because I was going through a divorce. So I did that under a pen name, because I didn't want my soon-to-be ex-wife knowing about this. And it wasn't full of venom or like, women suck. This is terrible. It wasn't a crybaby session for me. It was, what's the best way to tell your kids? You know, how do you handle your finances? You know, you're going to go through the stages of grief, almost like a death.
Right. So it's a practical book.
Yes. But I didn't do my homework per se, because what I found out was the majority of my readers were women. They weren't men. Men don't read as much. And guys going through divorce really don't read a whole lot when they probably should be. But that was my target audience. And I didn't hit the mark. I was way off the mark. So, you know, that was called Divorced Dads. Kids are forever, wives are not. Yeah, I tried to add some humor to it, you know, and but
it was a learning. It was a learning.
Yes. And again, it's all about networking. I met Honorary Quarter. What I did was, okay, this is nonfiction. Who's got some really good books about divorce that are self-published? Honorary Quarter. She's got a series called The Successful Single Mom, you know, starts dating again, gets into shape, you know, gets a job, or, you know, there's like, I think she's got like 5 or 10 books like that. And they were all awesome. I love the covers. It was very smart how she did it. And I met her at the first 20 books to 50K conference. And she did like a review for me too on my book. And she was just such a nice person and just open to any questions that I had, et cetera, et cetera. And I was like, wow, this is great. So I started getting immersed in the whole writing thing. And I would start going to conferences, and people were coming up to me and they're like, oh, you're the police guy, right? Yeah. And I'm like, yeah. And at that point in time, I was writing my second post-apocalyptic book. I was writing a sequel. And they're like, just asking me questions about police stuff. And I'm like, yeah, sure, no problem. I'll talk to you. And before I know it, I got people pulling me off to the side, and they're like, you should really write a book. And I'm like, that's a good idea, but I'm in the middle of one right now. And like, the interest is here. Yeah. So I started the Cops and Writers Facebook group.
Right.
And you know, it was like me, my editor, and a couple of friends. And now it's up to like 5,600 people.
When did you start Cops and Writers Facebook group?
Boy, that's a great question. 2020.
I was trying to find
2019, maybe.
Okay, and that's actually
2019.
And I'm going to put these up because that's when your first book, which is the one from the Academy to the Street was the first one, came out in 2019, and then the second one came out. So that was June 2019, and then the second one came out October 2020.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
And it's a funny story how that came to fruition.
Yeah. So tell us about these two.
Yeah. So, you know, I'm getting all these questions. I'm starting the Facebook group, and there's a definite need. You know, when you're writing nonfiction, what are you doing? You're solving somebody's problem. And the problem was, hey, you know what? I've never fired a gun before. You know, is there a safety on a Glock? You know, just simple stuff like that. Or, you know, what constitutes an arrest? Can you really tell me not to leave town? You know, stuff like that, you know, that you see on TV, that none of the above is true. And I'm like, okay, well, I should do that. So I started writing. And it's like I found an editor that was also a defense attorney that is an editor. And that's Jennifer Severino. And she was the perfect match for me because she knew the law inside and out.
Right.
And she was a criminal defense attorney. I'm like, perfect. You know, and again, the common trope is like, all cops hate defense attorneys. No, we don't. I mean, it goes by what kind of person are you? We all understand that you have a job to do and we have a job to do. And your job is to fight for your client. And my job is to do the best job I can to make sure that whatever I arrested this person for sticks, that I didn't make any mistakes, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So to make a long story short, I write one gigantic book. Then I go out and I meet Brian Cohen from the Sell More Books show. And all these people I just reached out to. You know, it's like, hey, he's got a cool podcast. So I just emailed him.
And, you know, I've not to interrupt you, but I was going to say, book people are amazing people, especially indie published people. There's an inherent thing in all of us that want to help each other succeed.
Absolutely.
You know, and that's what I just love about indie people.
Oh, yeah. It was him, Kevin Tomlinson from Draft to Digital,
Mm-hmm.
I would just like call those guys or text them or whatever. I'm like, hey, I'm stuck. What do I do?
Yeah.
Yeah. And Brian at the time lived in Chicago, which was about an hour and a half from where I live in Wisconsin. And we went out one time. I picked him up at his apartment and we just went out for drinks and video games. We went to this bar that had like old 80s video games, stayed. I'm like, oh, this is so cool.
Yeah.
And we're talking about the book and he says, why not split it in two? And I'm like, that's a really good idea because it was pretty hefty. It was about 120,000 words.
Wow. Yeah.
So he's like, yeah, split it in two. He says, you'll make double the money. And, you have a theme going, it's like from the Academy of Street, the basic stuff. Then the second one, make it crime scenes and investigations. We're just like bouncing ideas off of each other. And then before I know it, boom, they were born.
Yeah. Now, is there a third one going to be in the series?
I was going to, but I got so busy. I don't have time to write it.
Okay. Because, and also I want to mention that these are reference guides for authors and screenwriters because you work with screenwriters. You're a technical consultant for crime and police procedure authors and screenwriters. So
yes,
talk about that a little bit. Then we'll go back to your books.
The screenwriting, it's around the same kind of community. You were talking about Adam beforehand, Richardson, my buddy. He does it a lot more than I do, but he lives in California where it's a target-rich environment.
Yeah.
I've done a couple of them, and you can never really talk about them when you do them.
Yeah.
That's the thing. You can't
until they come out. Until they come out. Yeah.
And I also had some indie filmmakers like, hey, could you look at this clip for me? I'm doing this police drama, and it's like an indie film person. And one of them, oh my God, I felt so bad for him because it was so god awful bad. He's talking into a radio that doesn't have an antenna. He's got his finger on the trigger. He's pointing his gun at his partner. And I'm just like, dude, you're doing a lot of stuff wrong here. I'd be more than happy to help you, but he took that the wrong way. And I tried to soften the blow as much as possible, but didn't happen.
Criticism. Sometimes you can take it and sometimes you refuse to take it.
Yeah, it's tough. Nobody likes that. But like I said, I tried to be as nice as possible about it. But oh well.
I mean, I could see if you were just somebody off the street, but you kind of knew police procedure, just a little bit.
Again, talking into a handheld radio without an antenna. And you can see like the little grooves where the antenna was supposed to be. And I'm like, oh, come on, guys.
Somebody's going to pick that out.
Oh, yeah. And like the gun stuff, anybody that's fairly familiar with guns and like tactics and that kind of stuff would be like, no, that's.
Well, you definitely don't aim it at your partner. So.
No, we try to avoid that. Yeah, it's a good way to.
Gun 101.
This is a rated G podcast, so I'm not going to say exactly what would be said, but I'll keep that to myself.
Oh, thank you. Okay, but yeah, I mean, there's certain things that even unless it was more like a airplane type movie and they were doing silly stuff, because then you could get away with it. Probably not the gun thing, but. Anyway, so I want to talk about your podcast for a minute because you mentioned that, and I absolutely love this picture of you. I have to say that it's the epitome. It's to me this one is just such a nice picture, But and then I'm going to show this one too. This was actually when you were on duty, correct?
Yes.
And explain this one real fast, and then we'll go to the podcast.
The cigar one was on duty as well.
Oh, okay.
I was working in both these pictures. This one was, I had a cop that worked late shift that I was in charge of, and she wound up getting a canine. So she went, and she had enough time on where she went day shift, and they more or less had free roam of the city. And one time she was at the district station doing X, Y, or Z, and she says, hey, are you busy right now? I'm like, no. She said, hey, would you mind doing some training with my dog? And I'm like, no, because the canines are continuously training. They don't realize it's training. It's playtime.
Right. It's fun for them. Yeah.
Yes. You got to make it entertaining for them, and fun for them. And I love dogs. So I'm like, yeah. So we just went to some abandoned like warehouses, and I would hide.
Okay.
She'd make sure that the dog couldn't see me. She literally like would put the dog, so he's facing away, and I would go hide, and she'd give him, she'd give him the command to go track me, and boom, every time he found me.
Wow.
So I'm like, here, let me play with the dog. Just okay, that's fine.
Well, that's not a bad duty thing for you to do on duty or whatever.
No, I absolutely loved it. I was a sergeant, and being a sergeant, I thought was the best job on the department because you have 1 foot on the street. And I was a patrol sergeant my entire career. I wasn't inside.
Okay.
And that doesn't mean that I did have some jobs I had to do inside, like paperwork, that kind of thing. Or if the lieutenant wasn't working that night, I might have to sit. We call it, hey, go sit in the chair, which means you have to sit in the lieutenant's office and be the lieutenant.
Right.
You're the acting lieutenant. So we would try and do that equitably. And I never liked being inside. So that's why I never took the promotional exam for lieutenant. But sergeant, you're on the streets. And there's certain assignments.
You're in uniform.
Oh, yeah. I was in uniform, but I also did plainclothes stuff, too.
Okay.
I have done that. And plainclothes isn't as glamorous as fun as you think it is. Yeah, I love being in uniform because, A, I'm not good at matching clothes, as my wife would tell me. Yeah, the blue pants go with the blue shirt really well. Yeah, I'm the guy that needed granimals, so that's... So, the black boots and the black belt, it all matches, and if I tear them at work that night, the city buys me a new pair. So I'm like, bonus, this is great.
Really, that's funny.
And I've got the bat belt with everything on there that I need. And yeah, life is great. I love being in uniform.
One question when you were in uniform, I know people probably ask you about the gritty stories. I want to ask you, do you remember any story where it proved humanity was still alive? I mean, something somewhere where something amazing happened that just warmed your heart. I don't know,
There wasn't a whole lot of those moments, unfortunately, but I love the question because I've never been asked that before. So that's fantastic. What I had seen was my cops or, like, say, a partner going out of their way to be nice to somebody that they didn't have to. I remember one of my cops literally was helping a little old lady across a busy street. He parked his squad and he saw that she was having a really hard time, making it across the street. I don't know how many cops that I know have bought breakfast or lunch or dinner for some kid in the inner city that we knew that wasn't eating right or whatever. It's like, let's go to McDonald's. Not that McDonald's is eating right, but they thought that was awesome, But a funny story, my first partner on the job, when I was a police officer, we worked in probably one of the worst parts of town, but not too far away was one of the nicest parts of town, very wealthy. And there was also the college by there, etc. So we were stopping by, we're working midnight to 8, and both of us were hungry. And it's like, okay, the dispatcher's leaving us alone for the time being. Let's just run and grab something like at Jimmy John's or something. I forget where we were going. And we get flagged down by this woman, and she had 3 kids with her. And I'm like, oh, God. So my partner loved kids. She just loved kids. And she's like, oh, look, there's kids. And I'm like, great. Okay. So I'm like, it's Friday night, Patty. Her name was Patty. And I'm like, we're going to get slammed tonight. We're going to be lucky to eat tonight. Let's go. And she's like, no, we got to stop. And I'm like, okay. So I pulled over, and she's like, my car is broken. We got nowhere to stay. We're from out of town. It was a busy summer night. And she says, I tried a couple of hotels. There's no room at the inn. What do I do? And I'm like, okay. So Patty's like, get on your phone, Pat. Start calling hotels. So we put him in the squad car. And one, there's like a 2-year-old, and she's bouncing the 2-year-old on her knee. And then the mom and the other 2 kids are in the back. And we're in a marked squad car, and she's just having so much fun with this little kid. And I'm just like, okay, Patty. So I find a hotel, and it's in a suburb north of Milwaukee. So not only not in our district, but not even in our city. She's, oh, let's go. Let's take him. And I'm just like, we don't have a car seat. We don't have anything. Oh, come on. Let's just go. And I'm just like, we're breaking so many rules right now, Patty. It's like, but she was more concerned about that than anything else. And, that's humanity there. It's like kind of going the extra mile. Right. And there are stories like that where, I've been to one of my jobs as a sergeant was when somebody died, either natural or unnaturally, we had, if it was in public or in their home, we would have to respond to make sure there wasn't a crime that was committed.
Right.
And we did it also for kind of moral support, because even if you know the end is coming near, you know, let's say somebody has a terminal illness or something like that, it's still a shock. It's still terrible. But, you know, I remember this woman, her husband had a heart attack and he died. And, you know, they were well into their 80s and he had all kinds of health problems. So it probably wasn't the biggest surprise. But, you know, I had my cop stay with her until her daughter came over and the funeral home came to pick him up.
So she wasn't by herself.
Exactly. And we were busy, but I'm just like, no, this is more important. Then I had a suicide where a husband and wife had a fight the night before, and they went into separate bedrooms. He got up before she did. He went in the garage. It was a detached garage. She heard a loud bang, and she's like, oh boy. So she called a friend over, and sure enough, he shot himself in the head with a shotgun.
Wow.
So she was just obviously just
distraught. Yeah.
Yes. So I sat with her and held her hand for like 2 hours.
Wow.
You know, and just she told me all kinds of stories about her husband. You know, I tried until somebody would get there from her family or friends. It's like, you know, we got to do something for them. We just can't leave them in the lurch.
And those are the moments I think hopefully you can look back on and say, you know, even though there was a lot of cruddy people that I dealt with, there were people that I helped and I made a difference. And the mom with the 3 kids, she'll never forget that. And the woman who lost her husband, she'll never forget that, you know?
Well, you know, and I have responded to, you know, a guy on a bridge, you know, and I've been dangling off the bridge with dude, you know, me and like 3 other cops. I'm literally looking down at the freeway while I'm hanging on to this guy's ankles. And I'm just like, oh, this sucks. You know, how come it can't be like somebody that doesn't weigh 300 pounds? This guy was huge. And I'm just like, come on, be light. But
I take it you saved his, I mean, he lived, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And then, you know, I had a deal where we get called to a man with a butcher knife to his chest. And we're all around him. And I'm telling him, I said, you know, dude, you know, don't do it, you know, et cetera, et cetera. He smiled at me, plunged the knife into his chest and ran away. And there was like this half second of everyone looking at each other like, okay, now what? Oh, let's run after him. Yeah, we should probably run after him, but he didn't last very long and he dropped. He survived. And then a year later to the day, he's in a different part of our district. We get called for a man with a knife. Same guy. So
had to be something with that day. I mean,
absolutely. There's got to be the anniversary of something.
Right.
And I looked at him and I said, dude, do you remember how that felt last time? And he looked at me and says, it didn't feel good. And I said, it can't. I said, put that stupid knife down now. And he's just like, all right. So the second time he did not stab himself. And
that's
like,
good.
Okay, good.
That's good. Wow. So many memories, 25 years worth, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I'm scratching the surface. Yeah. I got all kinds of them.
So let's talk about your podcast. I'm going to bring that picture up. The one of you on duty.
Yes. That's the hat that my wife hates. She's like, take that furry hat off. I'm like, I love the furry hat. Come on, don't hate on the furry hat.
Probably kept you warm, you know?
Oh, yeah. Like I said, we're in Wisconsin outside. Yeah, you need the furry hat.
So far you've done, actually published 91 episodes, and I've gone through quite a few, and they're amazing. I mean,
Thank you.
You've got, and you do an interview. So some people do podcasts where they talk, you know, just themselves, but you actually do interviews. So talk about that and why you started it, what got you started.
You know, when I was promoting the Copsandwriters books, one of the ways I decided to promote myself was to go on podcasts because I like podcasts. You know, I listen to podcasts all the time, and I had a long commute to work. So that's when I really started loving podcasts, is when I had a long commute. And I would pop in a podcast and listen to that. And okay, now I'm kind of getting into this whole writing thing. So I started listening to podcasts about writing. And I got on, you know, like Joanna Penn's The Creative Pen, Self-Publishing Formula with Mark Dawson and, you know, James Blatch. And I've guest hosted with Brian Cohen on the Sell More Books show a few times. and I felt comfortable behind the microphone. And I've interviewed people, you know, for 25 years.
Yeah.
So, but I didn't take any courses, but I would listen to podcasts. I'm a huge Tim Ferriss fan. I think he's probably one of the best interviewers out there. And I tried to pick up on what he did right and what he didn't do right, you know, et cetera. And other people like in the business, you know, I like the way Jay Thorne interviews people from Writers Inc.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good podcast as well. He's a very good interviewer, and I've had him on the show too, and I've been on their show, you know. And so I enjoyed it. Long time ago, my brother, I had an older brother that was going to the same college that I was, and he was a DJ on the campus radio station. You know, this is back in the days of vinyl, you know, when dinosaurs roamed the earth, and you know, he'd be like, "Dude, I got a party I want to go to, or I got something going on. Could you take my shift?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'd love to." I wasn't supposed to be there, but I just did it anyway. And again, you just get used to wearing a pair of headphones and talking into a microphone, and boom, off to the races. So that stuck with me. And if radio wasn't dying, because I think radio is kind of dying as we know it, you know, like Spotify, before that, it was, you know, Sirius XM. Now I think, you know, like subscriptions, like Spotify seems, my kids tell me Spotify is like the way to listen to music. You know, I listen to Sirius XM and they said only old people listen to that. Oh, okay, thanks. So again, I love music. I was comfortable, you know, talking in front of people, and I wasn't really nervous about it. And I'm like, yeah, tally ho, let's do this. So I'm like, I'll do a podcast, and then boom, I did it to, you know, promote the books and get some recognition, promote the Facebook group, the books. And I had a consulting business where I'll still do that, but it's really tough because I'm writing a lot right now, and that's yeah, and I've got a couple other things in the cooker, and I'm a super busy right now.
I don't think any of us creatives, I mean, I think we all wear multiple hats, you know,
Oh, absolutely.
all the things that we do. Let's see, I want to bring up really quick, not really quick, we're almost done here, but I want to make sure we talk about your book. You've got 2 books. Let's talk about this one, because this this episode is actually going to come out on November 15th.
18th, I believe.
No, this episode.
This episode. Okay, yeah.
We're on. This broadcast will come out on the 15th, which is amazing because this book comes out on the 18th of November. So tell us about this. This is the first one.
Well, you know, going back to podcasting, I interviewed Craig Martell and Michael Anderle from the 20 Books to 50K fame.
Okay.
And I've been friends with Craig probably for the last 4 or 5 years. And I ran into Michael at one of the conferences in Vegas in the elevator. Him and his wife were there. And I'm like, "Hey, how are you doing? You know, my name's Patrick O'Donnell." He says, "Oh, you know, hi." And I could tell he's like, "Oh, that's nice." He doesn't, and he apologized later. He says, "Yeah," he said, you know, that's not my thing. You know, Craig is the guy who's the face of the conference. He's super outgoing. He said, "That's not me." So we do the interview, and it's one of my most popular podcasts, you know, as far as listenership goes. It was very, very popular. Craig had to go a little bit early to take care of his dog. So I finished the interview and I started talking to Michael, and he approached me and we just started talking. He's like, he has LMBPN publishing, and a big part of their catalog is sci-fi, fantasy, those types of books. And he's like, "I really want to get into the crime genre because that's hot right now." And I'm like, "It is, yeah, big time." And one thing led to another, and we just were chatting and we got along. You know, you could tell when you just click with somebody. And before I know it, boom, let's do it. So the first book, it's Brew City Blues. It's kind of a homage to Hill Street Blues.
Yeah, that's what you were saying. I remember you saying Hill Street Blues. Yeah. And I loved Hill Street Blues.
So did I. Yes. Yeah, like most TV shows, towards the end it got a little hokey, but
yeah, well,
it was
They
kind
ran
of
out of stories.
it did. But I love the characters.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's what I think was so good. You know, you had
Daniel J. Trevani. Oh,
yeah,
man. Yeah.
Captain Furillo.
Yep.
You know, and you know, he was always putting out fires. You know, it's funny because last night I went out with one of my old partners when we were cops, and he promoted up to captain. So I'm like, yeah, you're a fireman now. You're just putting out fires all day. And he says, yeah, absolutely. And he had the crazy ex-wife that was always, there was some crisis that was going on, with Frank Jr., or whatever.
Yeah.
Then you had, the sergeant that would do roll call all the time. And I loved him.
Oh yeah, he was awesome. Let's be careful out there, guy.
Yeah, and then Belker, the scruffy undercover guy that's chewing on a cigar all the time, that calls his mom every day.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was so perfect in his character. He was so, but that was his one redeeming quality.
Absolutely.
He called mom.
And you would see him like dating, and he'd actually clean up, and he was quite the gentleman. Yeah, he wasn't the scruffy, whatever.
Yeah.
That was his persona for the street. And I really liked that. Then later on, I watched Southland, and I liked that a lot. And it was kind of a modern Hill Street Blues where it followed different characters. And what I loved about that was it wasn't just all detective centric. A lot of police shows, it's like, detective this and detective that. And that's just one piece of the puzzle.
Right.
Yeah. And there's, most police work is done by cops. By street cops. Most of the shootings, most of the car chases, most of the stuff that is very dynamic and what you see on the news every day, that's cops. Are there detectives that do that? Absolutely, yes. But there's a couple of different kinds of detectives. There's the suit and tie detective, we'd call them, that are wearing a suit and tie, that, they'd respond to the homicide an hour after it happened. On TV, you see it. Instantly there's this like small army of detectives and there's no cops anywhere. And I'm like, who's doing the cop stuff? That doesn't make sense to me. But, what I liked about Southland was it kind of followed what would happen in an investigation. And it even caught like the gallows humor, the very dark humor that cops need to deal with all the BS that's out there.
That's the same humor that the first responders.
Absolutely.
I have a friend that's a paramedic, and wow, his sense of humor is pretty bad. But he said it's to survive. Oh
yeah, it's a coping mechanism all day long. You have to be that way.
Yeah.
And a little bit of Bosch thrown in. So that's what the series is, and the series is you have somebody that was the main character was in the Army. He went through some personal tragedies. He was 30 years old, and then he's starting his life over, moved to Wisconsin, got a job with the Milwaukee PD. Mm-hmm. So I know the geography, I know the culture, obviously, because I did it for 25 years.
Right.
And it's taking the reader, the first book is field training. Okay, that's, after you graduate from the academy, that's what you do.
And I'm going to show the next one.
So. Okay. Then after that, you're on probation. You're on probation for a total of a year. And the thing about probation is you're walking on eggshells, because it's real easy for the city to get rid of you. You have no recourse. There's no appeal. They can just, if they don't like you, this is the time to get rid of you, while you're on probation. And you're still very green. You're still a rookie, and you're going to do stupid rookie things. So you go from field training to probation. And the third book is choir practice.
Okay. And that one's going to come out
mid-February.
Okay, so I should say that the field training is going to be out November 18th. Probation will be coming out December 30th. Mm-hmm. So, and there will be links in the description for all of Patrick's not just his his Cops and Writers podcast, his website. He even put his email in here, so that's pretty good. But also his Cops and Writers Facebook group. I want to make sure we put that, and then his Amazon. But I'm going to put specific links to these books.
Okay, thank you.
So people can just click on them and get them. Mm-hmm. But anyway, anything else you want to say about this series? I didn't mean to interrupt.
No. Then the third book is choir practice, and for those who are not in the know, choir practice is kind of like a code word for let's go out and have some beers.
Okay.
It's like, okay, hey, there's a choir practice. And what was funny was, I worked midnight to 8, and you usually get some overtime or whatever. and you're going to a bar at 9 o'clock in the morning, but that's your daytime.
Yeah,
It's
you worked
totally
all night.
flipped. Yeah, you worked all night, and it's nice to decompress with your buds, especially if there was something big that happened or traumatic. That's some of the best therapy there is. So I'm in the middle of writing choir practice right now, and obviously the other two are already written. But yeah, it's been a blast, and it's awesome working with Michael. It's, as writers, it's kind of a solitude thing where, say there's a plot line or a part of the story that maybe you're doubting or you'd like some input on, and you're wind up talking to yourself. It's kind of hard. You don't know a lot of people that do this. So it's nice to have a partner and say, hey, what do you think? So that part I've really enjoyed.
Yeah, it's good to bounce off of somebody else, because
all day long.
In your own head, it's like, sometimes you just can't get over that hump or that whatever that thing is.
Yeah, and then you're like, is this even, is this funny? Is this dramatic? Is anybody gonna read it? Yeah. So it's nice to have, before you put it all together, and you have beta readers saying, man, this sucks, why'd you do this? Ew.
Yeah, really, you want to do something nice before the beta readers hit it, because then that's like the last of it. So we're just about, we're done here, but I did want to ask you the one last question is advice to writers. Now, this can be writers of crime fiction, of police procedural, or if they want to write a nonfiction book. Just what is your advice in general to someone that wants to start self-publishing and writing?
The way I look at it is, Stephen King's book on writing, that's like,
yes, I read it every year.
Yeah, that's a huge deal. I started educating myself. A lot of people will read in the genre that they want to write. Not that you're going to copy them, but there's tropes. Like if you're writing romance, there better be a happily ever after at the end. Otherwise, you're going to make a lot of enemies. They better be happily ever after. That kind of thing. And I think if you stick with the basics at first, okay, book cover, we were talking about that before. Is it look like something that you did yourself, like on my very first book? Or, not just is it a professional, modern looking book cover, because book covers changed through the years. If you have a book that's 15 years old and you had it professionally done and it was great for that time period, that may not fit, 2022. So it's something that fits the genre for today. It has to look good, and it has to meet the expectations of the reader. Say you have like a mystery, and you're thinking to yourself, it's like, okay, you see these books where there's like the lone silhouette of a person, maybe with like a pistol with like a suppressor on the end of it in a big city, and there's like maybe fog or something like that. Okay, that kind of tells you what the book is. You don't want your reader guessing what the book is. You should do that. Then secondly, like we were talking before, the blurb. It's a tough thing to do. To condense this down and not give the Reader's Digest version of your book, but lay those hooks, hook them in. A killer first sentence. I forget who wrote this, but and I know I'm paraphrasing and I'm sure I'm getting it wrong, but what would you do if you had to choose between your child's life and like the earth or something, like the earth being destroyed or something like that, and it's like something compelling that catches that reader right away. And then you go in to the story a bit and then leave them with a call to action at the end. Okay, will the hero save the day? The nuclear device says, there's 5 seconds left. Will he get to it? Will your, spy get to the device, or whatever the case may be? And sometimes people forget, you kind of have to hold your reader's hand and say, push the button over on the right and buy this book.
Click the buy link now.
Yes. And it's amazing how, you make it as easy and seamless as possible for your for hopefully your reader that's going to buy your book.
Mm-hmm.
And also a couple more things. If you set it up to where with Kindle, it's the look inside feature where people can read your first couple of chapters. If those are dogs, they're not going to buy your book. If they don't hook you, if they don't, there's got to be something compelling, something funny, something entertaining, something, if it's nonfiction, you're solving somebody's problem, and hopefully you could entertain them a little bit too. You don't want it so dry that they're going to fall asleep reading it.
Right.
And the last thing, well, not the last thing, make sure you have a good book, have a good story that's not full of typos and spelling errors, etc. Because people can be very judgy about that. No boy, the trolls come out. That's very scary. And then the last thing is with Amazon, you have your author central, you have your author page. Somebody's gone through all this. They're excited about you. They want to learn more about you. They click it on and there's nothing there. Bum, bum, bum. Yeah. So you're probably going to lose that person. So ham it up, put yourself out there. As writers, a lot of writers are introverts and it's hard to do. But if I didn't have my podcast, I never would have had a conversation with Michael Anderle and started writing with him. Yeah. And I've had a ton of other opportunities just because I have the podcast. And it's like anything else, if you want to learn, teach. If you're teaching something, you're going to learn a lot more about it. And it's the same thing with writing. Put yourself out there. I know it's difficult, and some people aren't exactly hardwired for that. But do your best to maybe make a couple of author friends and do some newsletter swaps and all that kind of fun stuff.
And realize, like I said before, that also other indie writers are your friends. They want to see you succeed. And, there are groups like 20 Books, and your Facebook group and lots of other groups like that where you can get advice. And there's people in there that are willing to help you. And you're not alone.
I'll plug a couple of really good groups. If you're writing crime fiction, there's another Facebook group called Trauma Fiction.
Yes, definitely.
There's first responders and medical people in there.
You can ask the questions that you're afraid to Google.
Exactly.
I've used that one a lot.
Yeah. There's legal fiction. That was my editor, Jennifer. She runs legal fiction, and if we don't know it over in Cops and Writers, or maybe it's more of the civil side of the law.
Right.
They're not going to give you legal opinions or anything like that. Please don't try that. That just makes them angry. But that's a really good thing. And then the fire, Ken.
Yes, Author Fire and Rescue.
Yes, Author Fire and Rescue is outstanding. Ken does a great job with that group. And then, of course, my buddy Adam Richardson, his podcast, Writers Detective Bureau. Yep. He's got his Facebook group, and he's got classes as well.
Mm-hmm. I've taken a class. That's amazing.
Yeah, and he's the perfect fit for that because he was teaching in college. He was a professor. So I tried doing it, and I'm like, okay, this is not my thing. So, Adam is a wealth of knowledge, and he's just a very patient, good teacher.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. And I will put links to all those because I have interviewed Ken, I've interviewed Adam, and so there are links on their videos, but still people can, get a reminder.
Yeah.
Patrick, thank you so much. This has been so much fun. I enjoyed your stories. I enjoyed all your information and learning more about you.
Well, thank you very much, Joan. It's an honor to be on your show.
And a best of success with your books coming up.
Thank you. Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed.
Anyway, so thank you for being here with us. And for those watching the replay, I appreciate you being here. Please like and subscribe, and you won't miss any new episodes. We'll see you next time.